All right. Medical ethics. Hey y'all, my name is Logan Blake. I am a master's student in exercise science at Auburn University, and I will be getting my doctorate in physical therapy starting in the fall. So I guess it seems like I have somewhat relevant opinion on this. But so let's just dive into it. I'm sure, as y'all already know, these are some loaded questions. So let's see what we can do. Do you support abortion? Why or why not? As according to my faith, I'm a Christian, and so I think that I do not support abortion. I am very pro-life in that we as sinful creatures do not have the right to decide who lives or dies, regardless. Thinking that we could better make that decision than God, who's all sovereign and all knowing. And I think that when we try to take powers out of our hand, we have a tendency to corrupt and manipulate what we believe is power. And there's no telling what kind of life that could come from any child, regardless of way of conception. And each child and each baby was, from my faith says, was knitted in their mother's womb and was known before the creation of the earth, and that each life is valuable, regardless. So I think that's going to shape a lot of my answers on the rest of these questions, ultimately boiling down to my faith. If yes, do you think if a child is born with a disorder, do you think it is still okay? If not, is there any scenario where abortion would be okay? Again, I think that every child's life, every fetus or baby's life is valuable and has value in the eyes of our Creator, regardless of scenario or disorder. And I think each life is special and has a story to tell at the end of the day, and a life that it could change. And so I think each child's life is valuable regardless. Some of the most grateful, happy, loving people I know were children with disorders, and I think that to say that their life is not valuable enough to keep because of that is wrong. And so I don't think there is any scenario, and even if it comes to saving the mother's life, I think that ultimately comes into God's hands, and if it ends up in her dying, it's hard to wrap our heads around that as sinful creatures and humans who want to be able to control every scenario. At the end of the day, everything that happens in this life is for our good and God's glory, though it may not seem like it in the moment. Do you think that parents should be required to vaccinate their children? Honestly, don't have a very well-rounded knowledge on this one. I think that it is important to vaccinate your children, because the reason the vaccinations are created were to prevent very preventable diseases that we ultimately have the science and the technology and the medicine to prevent, and ultimately improve the quality of life. From my understanding, there is no research showing that vaccinations cause any mental disorders or anything of the nature, and are ultimately very beneficial. So required probably, but it's kind of hard to distinguish what that would look like tangibly. Do you believe that gene editing is moral or right? Why or why not? I do not believe that it is moral. I think ultimately how we are created, all the way down to individual genes, was on purpose, and for a specific intention, with specific intention according to God's plan, and that even if what seems like would be something that would be wrong, it's ultimately for a purpose and for God's glory, whether we see that or not. By saying that we can edit genes in humans says that we could create better humans than God could. And in my mind, that is just not true, because we are sinful and biased and agenda-based people. Who will be to blame, if anyone, if AI, I'm assuming that's artificial intelligence, proves malfunctions in surgeries? Oh. Who will be to blame, if anyone, if artificial intelligence proves malfunctions in surgeries and scans? Don't really know. I think that I honestly don't know. I've not seen a scenario or been in a scenario where artificial intelligence is a superior way in surgeries, because just much like driving a car, human reaction and human decision is ultimately can be faster in a moment, especially upon outstanding unpredictable circumstances, than a machine trying to calculate what's going on. In scans, I think that's ultimately up to a doctor to be able to read and point things out, because there are anomalies in everything that we do. That's what kind of makes us humans, because we're not perfect. So I would assume the chain of command, but honestly don't know. I'm not afraid to admit when I do not know something. Question 6. Should doctors allow people to use medicine to end their lives if they so desire? Why or why not? Ultimately, at the end of the day, I do not think suicide is the answer to anything. I think that there can be good that comes from any circumstance, and any circumstance is ultimately temporary. Just in the same idea as abortion, I think that when we decide whether who lives or who dies, tries to take a power that should ultimately be left to God and His sovereignty and all-knowingness, and tries to put it in our sinful hands. It's a loaded question, of course, because you're dealing with someone's lives, but I think ultimately that is not our decision to make as humans, but to the one that created us. Should families be given the right to end relatives' lives if they are unresponsive? Again, I think that still falls in the hands of us trying to become creator, and deciding when a life is valuable or when a life should be ended or not. And because we are sinful people, we can make mistakes in our decision making, and I think ultimately it should be left up to God, because we've all seen miracles that have happened from long comas. I know someone who was in a coma for months and revived, and now it's been an incredible story to tell since. Do you believe that minors should be required to have a parent with them to get birth control? Why or why not? I am not a girl, so I don't have a great opinion on that. I think there are parental circumstances where